Oh, hi, Bob here. Welcome to nut-free fruitcake or nut-free Christmas cake. Call it whatever you want to call it, but it's the same thing. And before I begin showing you how to do it, I just want to say that even though this Christmas cake is delicious from last year, I made it last November, it's still not dark enough for me. I'm not sure what I left out. I was trying to make dark Christmas cake. At least I'm not sure what it was last year, but this year I'm sure. And that's what this is going to be. Not only a nut-free fruitcake, but a dark nut-free fruitcake. Okay? So stay tuned. First of all, get yourself a bowl about that size and put in it 2 cups of unbleached all-purpose flour. 2 cups. Make sure you measure it. It's 2 cups. And then put in 1/2 a teaspoon of baking powder. Not baking soda, baking powder. 1/2 a teaspoon. And then 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of nutmeg, 1 teaspoon of cloves, and a dash of salt. And mix it all together and set it aside. That's what I did. Now it's time to mix the wet ingredients. The first thing you need is some kind of a mixer, an electric mixer. A lot less work than doing it by hand. And I have a Braun Mixmaster here. It used to be my mother-in-law's, and she made some fine baked goods with this. So when she passed on, I got it, and it works great. The first thing I'm going to do is take 1/2 a pound of unsalted butter and make sure it's soft but not melted and put it in the mixer. And then I'm taking 1 1/4 cups. Make sure you measure it with a cup. I'm 1 1/4 cups of brown sugar. Now, the difference between brown sugar and white sugar is that there's more molasses in the brown sugar. I don't even know if they put molasses in white sugar, but white sugar is a lot sweeter than brown sugar. So whenever you're making something and it calls for white sugar, you can use less and get away with it. But the brown sugar has molasses in it, and the darker the brown sugar, the more molasses, which is one of the secrets to making a dark Christmas cake. So I bought the darkest brown sugar I can get, and I threw that in there with with the soft butter, and I'm going to whip it together until it's well mixed. I'm going to get a spatula or a wooden spoon and help it along. Ta-da, wooden spoon. Try not to get the spoon caught in the blade. So just pull it along the edges and push the butter and the sugar together in the middle, closer to the blade that's going like this. Be able to tell by looking at it whether it's well mixed. After you make lots of cakes, you'll know exactly what well mixed means. I use dark brown sugar for chocolate cakes and cookies. It has a caramel toffee taste to it. It's time to add the 5 eggs to the butter sugar mixture. We're going to put the whole egg in, of course take it out of the shell, put it in there, and whip it until it's completely whipped really well. I don't know, for 20-30 seconds. And then we're going to do each of the other eggs, and there's 5 of them. And these are large eggs. If you had small, maybe you could add an extra one. If you had extra large, you could add one less, but approximately 5 large eggs. And the eggs are at room temperature. In other words, they were in the fridge, I took them out, I waited 30 minutes, and now I'm going to mix them in with that. If you do it at room temperature, it'll mix even better. But if you do it when it's cold, like this, it's hard to get all the parts to the egg apart to mix well. Also, it has a lot to do with the protein in the eggs. The protein, when it's cold and you're trying to mix it, will hold on to the air bubbles in the mixture, in the batter mixture, and then your cake will have all these big air bubbles in it when you bake it. So room temperature, it's very important, 1 egg at a time. So I've got egg number 1 in there. Don't get any shells in it. Make sure there's no shells in the batter. Approximately, 30 seconds. Okay, egg number 2. We're on the 4th egg. Only 1 more. Eggs. It's time to mix the flour mixture in with the wet ingredients and the rum and the molasses. You need a 1/2 cup of molasses and a 1/2 cup of rum. It can be amber rum, white rum like this, or dark rum, whatever you want. I would prefer the amber or the dark, but I don't have any. So maybe my cake won't be as dark as I want it to be. But if you can get dark rum, get the dark rum. You need a 1/2 cup of each. So what we do here is we add a little flour, maybe a couple of tablespoons, as we're mixing it. Then we put a little bit of this molasses and a little bit of this rum in. Remember, total, a 1/2 cup of this and a 1/2 cup of that. And then the flour, then the wet, then the flour, then the wet, and we end up with the flour. So I got a couple of tablespoons of the flour mixture in here. And I'm going to keep my beater on low. Don't whip it up really fast. Keep it on low to do this mixing. It's very important. So I have 2 loaf pans here, and you can use those foil ones if you want. You can get, they're pretty cheap, but I like these ones here, clay ones. So what I do here is I'm going to butter the loaf pan around the edges, and then I'm going to put the parchment paper in. Maybe I'll butter the whole thing. Then the parchment paper will stick to it better. And then I'm going to put the parchment paper in. I don't have to put it around all 4 sides. I can put it lengthwise, hanging over the edges, or widthwise, hanging over the edges. It's only to get the cake out later on easier, so it doesn't stick on the bottom. So I think what I'll do is butter the whole thing and then put some parchment paper in there hanging over the sides. Okay, and then I've heated the oven up to 300 degrees with the rack in the middle. Okay, and then after I've got all my batter made here, I'm going to add some fruit, and I'll tell you what that is in a minute. So we're putting some unsalted butter on the inside of the loaf pans, and then we're going to add the parchment paper so it hangs over the edges. And then we're going to take this batter here and add all kinds of fruit to it. And then we're going to scoop the batter into the loaf pans and bake it in the oven for approximately 90 to 120 minutes. And that all depends on the size of your pan. So what you do is after 90 minutes, you take a toothpick and you shove it into the cake, open the oven, pull it out a little bit, shove the toothpick in after 90 minutes, and see if the toothpick comes out clean. And if it does, take the cakes out. But in the meantime, we're going to add fruit to this. I'll tell you. Yeah, now we're adding the mixed fruits and whatever. So we had let's just get this right. We had a cup of dark sultana raisins went in there, and a cup of currants, and then a half a cup of dried strawberries cut up into little pieces, and a half a cup of cranberries. You better cut those up into little pieces too. And a half a cup of apricots, cut them up into little pieces. A half a cup of dried bananas, cut that into pieces. Just 2 or 3 figs, and cut them up into pieces. And then a half a cup of the citrus mix. It looks kind of like this. You'll see it as the light green stuff. And then a half a cup of the candied fruit, like the cherries and whatever they put in, blueberries and stuff. I don't know what they put in. It's mainly cherries anyway, mixed fruit. So that's what you put in there. Mix it all together, and then you're ready to throw it into these loaf pans and bake it in the oven over there. Cut up all the fruit that we've decided to put in here. And remember, you don't have to put in all that fruit. The figs, the bananas, cranberries, the raisins. We've cut them all up into little pieces, and we're mixing it in to the batter. It won't take long to mix it. And it looks like that, and that's what the batter consistency is like. And then you dump it into there, okay? So then we're gonna cook it in the oven, 300 degrees, middle rack, for approximately 90 minutes. And then we're gonna check it with the toothpick to see if it comes out clean. And if it does, you take it out. If it doesn't, you cook it up to 120 minutes if you have to. And that all depends on the size of the pans that you use. Nobody said this was easy. And then if you do all that correct, and you've got it out on the counter, sitting there cooling, you're gonna dump maybe a half a cup of the rum over top of the cake while it's still sitting in the loaf pan. Maybe not that much. Maybe if you're a, quote, alcoholic, you could dump more in. And by the way, if you don't have enough rum around the house, you can use any kind of alcohol you want. Rye works, old wine works, red wine, white wine, whatever, brandy. Dump it in on top, but just enough to soak it.
Should you mix the alcohol?
Mix the alcohol? No, mix it with what?
Like put some rye in it, some
Oh, it
rum.
doesn't matter if you mix the alcohol. Just put it in there. But they recommend that you do rum. We've got rum in here to begin with, so why not stick with the rum? Choose your best rum and then use rum. But if you want to mix it, go ahead, mix it. But only soak it with maybe a half a cup. And then wrap it with foil, cover the whole thing with foil, and leave it on the counter, out, not in the fridge. Leave it on the counter for 12 hours. Okay? Then you can unwrap it, use your parchment paper, unmold it. So flip it over, unmold it, and there's your cake. Then you can slice it into very thin slices and eat it. Or you can slice it and put it in the freezer in little containers or with foil or whatever, and you can freeze it. You don't have to, it's not like the other kind of fruit cake or cake that you wrap it in the cheesecloth and the foil and you leave it in the fridge for a couple of weeks, and then you take it out and you unwrap it and then you put more alcohol on. You keep doing that for 6 months or something. You don't have to do that.
I gotta get that.
Don't waste any. Make it the same size. If this had more in it, of course it would take longer to cook. Both pans are the same kind of pan. You might be using those foil pans that you can get at the dollar store. They look the same as these, but they're foil. And if you do that, put two together and then put your cake in. Would you use the parchment paper? I don't know. And probably, maybe not. Yeah, probably. Do it the same way. You use two because that will make the foil thicker so it won't burn on the bottom. This is not going to burn at the bottom. Temperature is only 300 degrees. Slowly cooks in the oven. Well, here they are. It took 90 minutes, maybe a couple of minutes early, and I shoved my toothpick in and it came out clean, and they're both finished. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put about a half a cup of rum on the top of this one and a different half cup on that one, and then I'm going to cover, when they're cool here, I'm going to cover them with foil and let them sit for 12 hours. Then I'm going to flip them over. The parchment paper will make it easy to get them out, and I'm ready to eat them or freeze them. Well, it's been over 12 hours since these cakes came out of the oven. So it's time for the unmolding. So I've got a little pan here, and I'm going to take the cake and flip it over top of the pan. And then see if it comes out easily. No, so maybe I'll do it this way. I'll pull on the parchment paper and lift it out. Hey, that worked perfectly. See the pan? Not much cleaning. And the other one, make sure it works the same. Just lift the parchment paper. Oh, works perfectly. Out it comes. So we just unmolded it. And it's ready to eat. You can slice it thinly, according to what most people would do. When you eat fruit cake or Christmas cake, you really don't eat giant chunks like you would a normal piece of cake. At least in my family, we ate giant chunks of cake all the time with lots of icing. For this, you just cut it thinly and taste it. So let's do that. So let's just put one over here, put one in the middle. We'll cut it on the end with a nice knife here, serrated knife. We'll look at the inside. Well, it is darker. Let's look at this part. Yep. It might be a little dry. It's got a few air bubbles in there. But let's see. Well, it tastes fine. It's not as moist as I'd like it to be. So maybe the alcohol you know how you soak it in alcohol with over the months might be the answer. Anyway, pretty good. It's definitely cooked.